and see how we go. So this week we're going to do things a little bit different. I'm not going to dive into like a detailed topic where we sort of talk for 30, 40 minutes and then throw to questions. I want to keep this more clear and just really focus on what your questions are. So there was a question on the Facebook group only about 15, 20 minutes ago asking about how to do certain door styles. So I figured what we'll do is probably start with that. All right, so what we're going to do is have a look at that Polytech door style. So I'm going to open up here a web page showing the door style that the question was asked regarding, and we'll see if we can get into that one. So when looking at this door style, there's a couple of things that I noticed straight away. One of them is that there's an outside edge profile and there's a pocket with an inside edge profile. So just bringing this up to look at this a little bit clearer. Let's see if we can zoom in there. What you'll see here is that you've got the pocket and then you've got what looks like a 45-degree bevel, and then it looks like another 45-degree bevel. And on the outside of the door, it looks like there's a bit of a sort of flat spot and a round over on the edge. So I'll go through and sort of just explain briefly how to sort of go about creating a door that looks like that sort of style. So what we're going to need to do first of all is start in the optimizer and have a look at the tools that are included there. So let's go ahead and open up the optimizer. All right, I'm going to make this a bit bigger so you guys can see it as well, a little bit clearer. All right, so let's jump into libraries and then we'll go down to CNC tooling. So on the CNC tooling here, we're going to go and have a look at the panel tool groups. So again, I'm going to make this a little bit larger just so it's nice and clear to see. So a panel tool group is basically a combination of different tools at different heights and depths. The combination of those tools is going to create a profile, and having a look at this nice and clear here in a 3D perspective, we're going to see the profile that generates. So our first goal to create this Polytech door style would be to generate a profile that's going to give us these sort of inside edge profile routes, if that makes sense. So let's take a look at that. Let's go ahead and create a brand new panel tool group. So I'm going to click to add a group and I'm going to give this a name. I might call this the Polytech square. And then click OK. So from there, let's go ahead and insert a couple of tools. So the first thing I'm going to need is a 90-degree sharp corner tool, which will give me a 45-degree bevel. A lot of people confuse this and they'll refer to it as a 45-degree. I guess technically it's a 90-degree because we're talking about the included angle of the tool, but it does give you a 45-degree bevel when using that to cut. So whichever way you refer to it, that's the sort of tool that you want to find. And keep in mind, it might not be called 90-degree sharp corner tool in your Mozaik library because perhaps you've renamed it to be suitable for your machine. So maybe if for example, if you're running something like a BSE, you've probably called it 45 DEG or something along those lines. So make sure you start with selecting the appropriate tool for your machine. And if you're not sure what that is, I'd recommend looking inside your tool set to see which tool is in your tool set. And as you can see at the moment, if I go and select my MDF tool set, I'm going to need to make sure that 90-degree tool is actually available in my tool set, loaded and ready to go. So that's something that you need to consider. Okay, so when you add the tool itself, just by clicking on the tool on the left-hand menu and clicking the green plus symbol, it's going to drop that in to the, the screen here where you can see the tool. We can definitely sort of pick that up and move it around, as you can see. The first thing I would probably do is change this to run on center. So you've got the option to have it on edge or on center. Now, what you'll see over here is you've got your depth and offset, and we'll look at them in a second. But with a 45 or a 90 or any kind of angle tool, it's going to be much easier to work from the center of the tool. That way, when you're looking at your offset on 0, the offset is based on the center of the tool, not the edge of the tool. So first thing I would do, change the control to the on center option, and then go ahead and make your offset 0 to start with. And then we're looking now at the depth. So we're looking through a side perspective of the door at the moment, right? So we're looking at how this would look as it cuts through the door. The green indication here, where you can see the line running vertically and horizontally across the screen, is indicating the position of the pocket, I guess, is the easiest way to sort of describe that. So if I was to open the example image here, we're looking at the outside edge of where that pocket would come to. So basically this point here where the pocket would run along and finish. And then if we're looking at that in Mozaik terms, if we go open the door category in Mozaik, so we'll go to libraries doors, and I open up a routed door, we're talking about the margins here. So the line in the panel tool group is basically the same line that is indicated in red here. So you'll see that basically that red line will correspond in my optimizer to this green line that runs down the center. So now that we know that, imagine we're going to be pocketing this door up until sort of this point here. You'd need to take a measurement from the outside of the door to what that point was, and that would be your margin. So that might be 66 millimeters, it might be 70 millimeters, it might be 50 millimeters, whatever it is for you, but that would be the appropriate option to use. So what I'm going to do here is basically look at just having a staggered tool to set up both options. So I'll show you what I mean. If we open this up, I want one that's sort of the same depth as my pocket. It even looks actually slightly deeper. It kind of looks like the 45 might run a little bit deeper than the pocket with this particular design, and then another one that's shallower than that. So basically, I'll just show you how to do that with the depth here. Let's say you're running a 6 millimeter pocket. You might want the first step to be at 7 mil deep. And then I'm going to add the same tool again. So again, with the same tool selected, click the green plus symbol. And this time, it might only be a depth of 1 or 2 millimeters, but it's probably going to be offset to create that staggered step. So with the offset value, if I was 7 millimeters deep before, if I just start with the offset, and you can see with this can be a positive or a negative, whether you're trying to move it in towards the inside of the door or out towards the outside of the door. So in this case, I'm going to go -7 and move that out. So with a -7 value, what you'll see here now is I've got the first step and then the second step. And again, I'm looking at that thinking maybe that depth is too much, or maybe I want to go with my offset a little bit further. Maybe I'll go to -8. And it's about creating the look that you're trying to generate with that dual sort of step. And you might even want a flat edge between those rather than like it ramping back up there. If that's the case, then you'd probably want to add a flat down spiral cutter or a sharp corner cutter to give you that perspective. So if I just go and grab an 8 millimeter down spiral and press to add that one in, let's go ahead and make the depth of that one 2 millimeters, and let's bring our offset back. So if that's an 8 millimeter cutter, I'm already 4 millimeters over. I'm trying to get to a total of 8 back this way. So if I just put the negative as -4 and enter, I'm then getting those tools to line up. So what you'll start to see when we look at this in 3D is that we're generating a profile that looks somewhat the same as the example. So we're getting that internal bevel and then a flat spot and then an external bevel. So we're getting those kind of two profiles. Now, this center panel, that can remain, that can be cut out for glass, that can be pocketed down for shaker. All of that happens according to the options that you select in your door style. So that's what I would sort of go about doing there, and we'll get to that in a second as well. Okay, so let's close out of the 3D viewer here, and we'll go ahead and look at now an edge tool group, because the edge tool group would be the one that's going to give you that kind of edge profile. And this Ogi example here will just show you kind of what that would look like. So that would be creating a sort of profile that's sweeping in and stepping up and running around the outside edge of the door. So, again, you can apply the same theory here where you can have different types of outside edge profiles, and there's going to be a few different examples already preloaded in there for you. But they're easy to set up, and it's the same theory. It's really just assigning a tool to the door and running that around the outside edge. Looking back at the example picture there, it is pretty hard to see from this perspective. Maybe they have more images that will sort of show this in more detail. I can't really see that there, but I guess what I'm sort of pointing out there is what we want to see is, what is that profile around the edge? It looks like maybe a fairly decent pencil round on the outside edge and maybe a flat spot leading into maybe another slight pencil round on the top of that. So whatever the outside profile is, you wanted to make sure that you've got the appropriate tooling to do it to generate that sort of profile. And I'll show you just using this example option here. So now that we've got the tooling set up, we're going to jump back into the Mozaik side, and on the doors, I'm just going to create a new one, and I'm just going to call this the Polytech Classic example. And again, I want to set my margins appropriately, so I'm just going to go ahead and set it to around about, if I'm trying to get sort of 60 millimeters to the, I guess the point on the door, like most people when they look at that door will be trying to talk about the outside point there. So looking back at that tool set that we created, you're probably going to be closer to 70 millimeters than 60, because 60 is to the inside edge of the pocket. 60, you want to be the outside edge, but we're going to specify what's happening to the inside edge. So in this case, I'm just going to go through and enter 70 mil everywhere. And I'm going to give that a pocket depth of 6 millimeters. Then I'm going to come into the center here and change that panel type to a pocket. And that's what I was referring to a second ago. If you have that panel type there as a pocket, that's what's going to make it recess down. So in here, you don't necessarily need to assign the tooling, because that would happen in the design, and I'll show you that in a second. But what you do want to do if you do set up a new door style, for a couple of things you want to do. You want to make sure that you either tell it to bore for hinges, if you want to bore for your hinges, or if you want to bore for handles or pulls or locks, you got to turn those options on. If you want to edge band this, you got to turn on apply band in. So there's a couple of choices there. And then lastly, you would probably want to make a copy of this and make it available as a draw front. So you just go copy there. And for example, this one would be my draw front. So I'm going to copy that one out there and then click the draw front button there. And of course, the draw front would need to be a certain size to support those 70 mil borders. And there are a couple of options that you can control there. But just jumping back into the job, let's go ahead and let's just change our base door style to this new option. And then when we do that, we get the ability to choose what our pocketing tools and options are. And this is where we're going to select that new panel tool group that we created. So you can see here in my panel tool group, there should be the new option that's come through. Let's have a quick look for it here. I'll just go back and check the name of that. I think I called it a Polytech something or other. Let's go back to the optimizer and have a quick look. Polytech Square. Okay, cool. So coming back to here, we should be able to see that one in the list. There it is there at the end of the list. And we're going to go ahead and choose a pocketing tool. Now with a pocketing tool, you need to make sure you're choosing a pocketing tool that's actually in your tool set as well. So having a quick look in your tool set that you're going to be using, I've got a 40 millimeter pocketing tool. So that's the pocketing tool that I'm going to select, because that's the one that I've got loaded, ready to go. So I'm going to choose that option. And then the outside edge tool, again, if you want to do the outside edge profile, this is where you will select it. If you're not trying to do the outside edge profile, you would just leave that as use cutout tool. In this example, we're going to go to the edge tool group and I'm going to pick the OG cutter. Now, that tool isn't actually in my tool set. So if I try to generate G code, it's not going to work unless I load that tool into my tool set. But just to give you an example of then what that would look like in Mozaik. So let's go ahead and drag a base cabinet out and look at this cabinet in 3D. And I'll go ahead and show that in a field perspective mode. And there you go. So you'll see the generation of the outside edge profile, the inside edge profile with that pocket. And you'll sort of see if I zoom in here, we've got the same sort of thing happening where we're going slightly deeper than the pocket, the 45, and then another flat step to the 45. So I think it's reasonably easy to go through and create those profiles when you just sort of think about it from a tooling perspective and understanding what those steps are. So hopefully that helps answers the question and gets you to a point where you can start setting up and testing some of your doors. All right, so we had another question come through, a little bit off topic, but for the shaker doors, is it possible to arrange the parameters in the parameters tab list within a pocket? Yeah, so I know what you're asking there. I guess you're saying if you go inside the parameters tab here, if you've added a couple of parameters, they display in the order of which you've added them in. So the only way to kind of rearrange them within a cabinet would be, I guess, to clear them out and put them back in the same perspective or the same order that you want. Definitely a nice feature request there to be able to sort of I guess, pick them up and drag them around, or maybe an up and down button to shift those around. But at the moment, that's not an option. Let's see. Can we have an overview of how to set up Gola drawers, please? So let me have a little chat about that. So Gola drawers, there's a couple of options. There is a Gola library. I don't have that loaded. I don't think I do. Let me just have a quick look. No, it doesn't look like I do. But we do have the sort of C channel Gola option in the CADMate library. So I'll show you sort of our version of that. So if we have a look into base cabinets, there will be an option here called base C channel finger pulls, which is basically a Gola cabinet. Gola is just a brand of the aluminium extrusions. There's other brands like Sulu, and there's quite a few different options, different companies that provide these things, but that's the sort of idea of what it is. It's a C channel or an L channel aluminium extrusion that you would use as a finger pull. So in our library there, we're going to have a folder that you can branch open, and you've got the doors, the drawers, corner cabinets, blind corners, and appliances. And again, each of those expand out and have various options within them. So let me just go ahead and sort of start with I might look at a drawer actually, because it's probably the easiest one to sort of go through and explain. I'll clear this other one out. So let's have a look. We'll double click on this and have a look at this in 3D. So what we're talking about here is the extrusion of the Gola or the C channel. Now, these have parameters on them that allow you to control the positioning of the C channel, the finger pull, and also the size of the C channel finger pull. So that's probably what the question's more relating to. So I'll focus on that. So we're going to go into the parameters. I'll start at the top and just explain what these different options are. If we look at the face tab, the first thing you want to do really is look at the size of your products. And I mean, you can clear these out and drop them in at certain sizes, which is probably more common, like that you'd probably drop in a drawer and say, look, I want that top drawer to be 180, and then I want to have 2 equal drawers after that. So you can go through and definitely sort of set it up that way. The key thing that I want to point out is that when you've got your drawers set the sizes and the way that you want, what you want to do is look at whatever the top drawer says on the screen there. And I'll just see if I can make this a little larger again so it's a bit clearer to see. So we've got 180 for the top drawer and 230 for the second drawer. If we jump into the parameters tab, what you'll see is that we've got an option that says what is the top drawer height and what is the second drawer front height. So we're going to enter 180 for the top one and 230 for the second one. So all we're doing is we're typing in the exact same value that's displayed on the screen here on the parameters tab. Now what that does is that positions the C channel so it lines up with the drawer front above it. So that way it gets you to a point where you can put your hand in and use the extrusion to open the drawer. So that's the first sort of thing to note. The next thing to note would be that you've got your reveals. So as you can see here, I've got a 30 mil reveal at the top of my cabinet. So if I change that value to say 20 millimeters, the drawer front comes up. Okay, so that's just one thing to note. You've got your reveals controlled there. So you've got your top one, and then you've got your mid reveal, which will be the other options. So if I go say 20 there, you'll see that the bottom two have gotten shorter. So you can control your reveals on the parameters tab there as well. And then coming down, we've got some options here, and I'll try and sort of show you this side by side because it might be easier to sort of understand if you can sort of see what's happening as I'm changing these parameters. So I'll just rearrange my screen a little bit here so you can sort of see these things at the same time. Okay, so when we're looking at the first option that is FP rails off, so you've got the ability to turn off all the finger pull rails by entering a value of 1 there. So what that does, that turns off just the C channel extrusion for all of the drawers. Now, you might wonder, like, why would you want to do that? So I'll just sort of demonstrate that before we move on. So if I had two of these cabinets, rather than having an aluminium extrusion on both, we've got the option that you could extend one over the other, or maybe right through an entire run. So looking at this cabinet here, if I open this one up and go to back to parameters, this one I would not have that turned off. I would leave it on. And I would use my other options down here that it says, okay, how far do you want to extend the rail to the left or right? In this case, I've got the cabinet on the left, the next cabinet 600, so I'm going to extend the top rail 600. I'm going to extend my mid rail 600 and my bottom rail 600. And what you'll see on this particular product, that then has the C-channel extrusion rails extending over. But then when we're looking at the entire job in 3D, we're getting a nice and clean perspective because our lines are sort of going straight across. So again, I'll just try and make that a little larger. So you'll see what I mean here. The aluminium extrusion then runs across both cabinets. We're not seeing a line or a break between the extrusions. So it's a much cleaner effect. And it also means that when you're ordering these things, you're going to get a better ordering perspective, right? Because you're going to know what the overall size of these things are. So hopefully that sort of makes a little sense. And the reason why we've got them individually controlled, I'll sort of show you now, because potentially the top rail might be different to the other rails. Like, for example, if I just go ahead and grab a door on this side and we look at this again, you're going to see what I want to do here is turn this one off, because what I'm trying to do is get rid of that line, the break between the extrusion. So I would go to this cabinet here and go into edit and use my parameters. And I'm going to go ahead and turn this one off by changing that value to 1. And now I'm going to go back to my original cabinet and I'm going to extend it an additional 450. So coming back here, we would now be at a top rail value of 1050. Okay, so the top one's extending now further across to cover the other cabinet. And that gets you the perfect sort of, C channels that's running right the way through. So hopefully that's a little clearer on what those parameters do. Now, in terms of like overall setup for them, there's not really much that you need to do because it is ready to go. But what you can control on a global library level is the size of them, because obviously different providers are going to have different sizes. So if I look at the job parameters and I come down to the other category, what you're going to see here is that we've got control for different types of finger pull rails. Now, what you're looking for is the parameters that say FPC, because that's the C channel or L-shaped channel finger pull rails, right? So you've got a C channel depth, which is going to control the overall depth of that channel, a top rail option, which is going to be the height of the top rail, and I'll show you each of these, and then the C channel mid rail height. So they're the three kind of main controls that you want to set up globally in your library. So you just want to go to libraries, products, select the CADmate V11 library, go to parameters, and then drop this down to the other category. Bring this down, and if you have a look at the C channel options, and you'll see them written there, you'll see finger pull CL channel depth. So it's the depth of that channel. I've got it set to 23 millimeters. The L channel top rail height is 50 millimeters, and my C channel in between drawers option is 68 millimeters. So that's what you would set up there. And just to show you that on a cabinet level, I can go through and change that for every cabinet, but of course it'd be quicker just to do it for one, for the whole library. But I'm just going to bring each of these parameters onto the cabinet and just sort of highlight what they do, so you can just for make it really clear. So the depth here is what we're talking about. There is the overall depth of the channel from front to back. So just to demonstrate that, if I was to make that really deep, like 50 millimeters, you'll see the cutout depth go back. My model's not changing because my model's a fixed thing, but I guess you're seeing what we're doing there. You can control that channel depth really easily. So that was 23. The top one, so that one there is the height of this rail. So if that needed to be 80 mil, for example, that's going to get longer. If it needed to be shorter, you could go ahead and enter the size that you wanted for the top rail, and that's going to control that one. And then coming down, of course, we've got the C channels. And if we have a look at this one's set to 68 millimeters. Again, you can make that longer or you could make that shorter, and you can control what you want those to be. You can do that on every individual cabinet, but again, change it in the library. That's gonna be the way to go. Thanks for the feedback there, Fraser. Glad that that sort of cleared that up for you. Okay, so one question that came through relating to that was, how do you make the drawers hang down 5 to 10 millimeters of the C channel. Cool. So yeah, good question. If I open that back up and take a look at that, so you do have a couple of options. So what you're referring to there would be like, how do you extend this down so you can maybe hang the top drawer over and control kind of what that is. So yeah, there's a couple of ways that you could go about that. You do have the ability to change the positions on the side. So like one option would be, rather than having it at 230, would just be to change that value. So if I went, for example, to 220, then that's going to overhang the option there 10 millimeters. And same thing here, if I reduce this one to 170, it's going to be 10 millimeters that way. So you can certainly change it there, but the preferred option would be to keep those the same size. That's kind of like a one option that you've got. But if I go into the other category here, we do have an option that controls the overhang. So let me just change that one, and I can change that on a local level here. And we'll go ahead and go to the overhang. So if we go to finger pull rail overhang, and I change this one to 10 millimeters, just to show you what's going on there. So the 10 millimeters is the easiest way to do this, because you can see that if it's at 0, it's flush and lining up with the top of the channel. If I set that to 10, it's now 10 millimeters. So the channel automatically moves up, and you don't have to change your drawer front sizes or anything like that. So that would kind of be the preferred option. But one, I guess, caveat that comes with that is that the drawers internally are not going to understand that they need to move up to 10 millimeters. So I think that's kind of one factor that you need to sort of consider. If you're going to do that approach and have the channel sitting up higher where it's eating into your drawer space, there's a couple of ways you can manage it. You can either go in and increase your drawer bottom reveal space in your drawer guides, and actually have drawer guides that are designed to work with that additional 10 millimeters or whatever that value is for you, where they move up by that value. The other option would be to go ahead and maybe insert like a rail that's going to push them up as well. So if I was to just show you here, if I click and add something in the middle here, and I'm just going to say, let's make that a stretcher, and let's flush that to the bottom of the line. By doing that, what I've effectively done, and it might be a little hard to see on screen here, but what I've effectively done is sort of, showing Mozaik that I want to allow, an extra 16 millimeters of space for that to come up. So that's one way you can do it. So you're sort of putting an object in there that the software is recognizing, because if I remove that, you'll see that drawers come back down. Now, it's probably still not enough in this case, because it's the stretcher is only 16 millimeters and it's from the middle here, so it's not really enough space. So probably the first option would be the better one to do. That way you're not sort of mucking around with that too much. Another third choice, not to confuse you, is using your adjustments on the face of the cabinet. So if I was to click on that front face and press adjust, and let's say I was to adjust that down, let's say I want to allow another 20 millimeters, I might adjust that top one down 20, and then I'm going to go to this next one and put an adjustment of minus 20 on the next one. You can see that I'm shifting this down, and if I can come back and put this to 180 again, effectively I've left my rail in the same position with my cutouts in the same position. I'm still 10 mil down, but I've now got a bigger space between the product and the drawer itself. So that would kind of be what I would do. I'd probably just go through and adjust this and set my adjustments on each one, and then save that back into my library, so that way I didn't need to worry about this moving forward. So you can go through and put all your adjustments on there. Again, just set your drawers to what they were. So in this case, 180 and 230. And as you can see, then all my drawers fit. I would probably still, maybe change that top drawer to a smaller drawer. Again, it depends on what you want to fit and what drawer system you're using. But hopefully that kind of makes sense. All right, let's have a look at some of the other questions. So Fraser's asked another question relating to this. Is there a way to move the drawer up within, but leave the drawer front in the same position? Okay, so you're asking, if you want to move a drawer up, like for a 1 to 5 bin that hangs down. Okay. I think I know what you mean. So what you're asking there is if you're if you're able to sort of position a drawer higher up in the cabinet. So let's open up just a standard drawer cabinet, like a bin cabinet, for example. Or actually, I'll just use a one drawer and just demonstrate this. So let's have a look. So by default, metal-sided drawers, their clearances are all based from the bottom, right? So what we're looking at here is we've got a drawer that's at the bottom. If we're trying to use this as a bin drawer, we want it to be higher up in the cabinet. The best way to achieve that at the moment would be to go into Libraries Hardware and then go into the drawer guides and have a drawer guide like this one, like this Blumantaro bin drawer guide, where I've only got the one guide in there and I've got my bottom clearance set to the size that I need for the bin to fit. So my bottom clearance is 469 millimeters, which happens to be the amount that you need for that bin to actually work in that cabinet. And then when I press edit on that option and I go into the side boring, you'll see that I've also lifted up the side boring by that same amount. So I've got the original 33 millimeters that's standard for a Blumantaro, but I'm also pushing it up another 460 millimeters to allow for the bin as well. So that way I'm getting this in the minimum perspective of how high it needs to sit up in the cabinet for that to work. And you could do this for any of the drawer systems. Same deal on the front. So I'm just taking whatever the original front measurement was, and I'm pushing that up another 460 millimeters. So basically, I've looked at what the specs were, and I could see it was 460. I've added that value to my side boring and to my front boring, and I've added the 460 to the standard 9 millimeters of bottom clearance. So what happens then on a cabinet level, when I go ahead and choose the cabinet, if I go into overrides here and I go and choose that particular one that's set up as a Blumantaro bin drawer, it automatically then looks at that. So it's going, okay, I need the extra 460. So I'm pushing everything up 460 millimeters. And that's now set up and ready to go. What I would probably do in this situation would be delete the drawer bottom, because obviously we don't need that. That's where the bin component's going to go. So in this case, I can just go to my drawer bottom, go to edit, and go ahead and change that quantity to 0. And that's going to get rid of the bottom, leaving me with just the frame components with all the drilling. So I can manufacture that, slide my bin in, and I'm happy to go. And you can, a little side note on this one, you can also still, probably fit an interior drawer above that. So you can go into the interior, split that, and then go ahead and grab that shelf, move that up, make that a tray, go to your overrides and drop in whichever, tray system you're using. And then that's going to give you that particular option. So, you can certainly do that. Yeah, that'll be the way I'd go about that one. All right, let's have a look through some of the other questions. Let's see, is there any option to hide cabinets from the screen? Hide/show option in some cases can be very helpful. In 3D view, you can turn on and off layers, but not specific cabinets. So, for example, I guess where this can be helpful is if you've got a room design where you've got other walls in there. Let me just draw some other walls. So maybe, this is a tight room design where I haven't got much space between these walls. Okay, I'll just end it there and we'll go to 3D. If you're trying to get in there, it can be really hard to get a nice shot that way. So this is where you can use your hide function. You can just jump in, and with walls, you can expand that out and you can choose which wall you want to hide. So in this case, I want to hide wall 3. And that'll turn off wall 3, which will get you in that nice perspective where you can look at this from the angle that you want to see it. Currently, that's not an option on cabinets, but I'd be curious to know a little bit more about where that's useful. If I guess if that is something that a lot of people feel would be a useful feature to add in, we can certainly look at it. But at the moment, you definitely have that option to hide walls because they often are in the way. But for cabinets, there's no such option there. You can kind of move the cabinet out of the way if it was in the way. For example, I can click on that wall and I can create a backspace. I can click on that cabinet and then move it to the backspace too. So if I'm on the products tab here, I can click on that one and choose that I want to just put it on the back of the wall. That way I'm getting rid of that wall from my 3D view for a second. That would be one kind of quick trick that you could use on hiding cabinets. But yeah, definitely curious to know a little bit more about the sort of examples where that would be helpful. Rightio, so let's have a look what other questions we've got. when I do C channel or finger pull draws, my draws don't change height to suit the channel. So draws run halfway through the rails. I covered that at the start, but the first thing you want to do is look at whatever your draws are. So if it's 180 and 230, you've got to go to parameters and match that up. That won't automatically change. Whatever your draws are set to, go to parameters and type in the same values. It's not an automated thing at the moment. Hopefully, that's something we can improve in the future. But right now, that's how it works. Just go ahead and whatever the face is, match that on the parameters. All right. Okay. Got a question here from Jess that says, what renders can we provide clients? So you have with Mozaik, you've got your standard 3D view. You can obviously go from wireframe to hidden and field view. You do have options to tweak the lighting and shadows, but it's not a 3D render. It is sort of a fast generated 3D image. So I can go ahead there and dim my lights. I can increase my lights to make it really bright. So you can see it's quite a quick thing. I can dim my shadows or I can increase my shadows, depending on what I want to get there. And if you've got a graphics card, you can use anti-aliasing, which will just help smooth out some of the lines. In this case too, like you can untick show outlines. Like you'll see, especially with this door, it's a good example. So we've got show outlines turned on, which is basically just trying to make the outline really crisp. It's like a little bit cartoonish, but it does help people sort of see exactly where the door is, especially with these sort of gray colors and colors that will kind of blend quite easily. You can turn off show outlines just to show you that. So that way you're getting kind of more of just a generic view, and you can dim the light in and play around with the shadows to try and get the right effect. So just a quick note on that there, that, you know, you can get a pretty decent 3D image with just playing with those same figures. And you can see how fast it is. I mean, that's one of the nice advantages of Mozaik, that it is pretty quick to do these things. But if you're looking to get a photorealistic kind of 3D render, the best option would be to export to SketchUp and use one of the various SketchUp plugins. There's a lot of great options out there. You've got SketchUp have recently partnered with Chaos that offer the V-Ray product. So V-Ray is a fantastic 3D rendering option. You've got options like Vortex Spaces, which is one of the industry leading kind of options out there, where you can go to SketchUp and then from there into Spaces, and that's got some fantastic walkthrough options as well. You also got easy options, kind of like one called Aerial Vision from Render Plus, and that one can be baked into Mozaik, so you can actually click this button and render that with Aerial Vision, providing you've got that installed and activated. So that's something you can buy direct through third-party providers. So the option would be really clicking the option that says generate this in SketchUp in 3D. So just to sort of preview that, you click the SketchUp button. You can choose whether you want to see the doors and whether you want to create floors, whether you want to see operations, whether you want to have cabinet labels on. So whatever you want to choose there, go ahead and click that option, hit OK, and then it's going to launch your version of SketchUp and open the Mozaik job in that SketchUp environment. So we'll just wait for SketchUp to launch. It takes a little second for SketchUp to open up, and then here it is here. And I'll just sort of make that a little bit bigger. And again, then I can zoom around here and do the same kind of thing. So again, using the SketchUp environment, like I might sort of, delete out a wall or hide that scene, and you got the same kind of thing. But then you've got options to use the sort of, I guess, different options. Like you've got Spaces where you can export this out to Vortex Spaces. If you've paid for that sort of product, they offer a nice subscription option for that service as well. Or in this case, I'm running SketchUp Studio, which means I also have the options to run things like V-Ray, where I can go through and go ahead and create a V-Ray render. V-Ray has some pretty cool features too, like options for like a light generator. So basically, in this, you can go through and you can kind of choose, is it an interior scene? What's the light source? Is it a sunny sky? And you can go look, play around with the variables and then just go create me like 9 different variants. And then it sort of creates 9 different lighting scenes automatically for you. So then you can choose the style that you like the most, and then that will be the lighting setup. So some pretty cool technology that really, I guess, emphasizes kind of like what you can do. And I'll just try and make this a little bit bigger. Doesn't look like the previews get any bigger. But as you can see here, this is like a really sunny kind of morning shot, and then a really kind of I guess, a high Kelvin factor where you can kind of see a lot of that yellowing from the sun. And then like an overexposed version. So somewhere in the middle here is going to be kind of most people's preferences there, depending on how bright you want to see that scene. So you just choose the one that you like, press save, go ahead and save that as whatever you want to call it. And that's going to be your lighting choice then, and then you can go in and run a render based on that. So you can have all the toolbars turned on, but then you can base your render on that. And see if I can just make this a little bit bigger. And with V-Ray, like the longer you leave that, the better that image is going to get as well. So you can play around with the quality, and also, obviously a lot of different settings. And V-Ray in itself is a beast of a program that you can certainly expand on. But yeah, heaps of options there. You did have an option like, can you change the colors of panels, etc. Again, yeah, look, you can do that in Mozaik. I can click on. I can do this in SketchUp or Mozaik. So just to show you both options here, for some reason, if I wanted to put like a metal texture on this door or something like that, I can go through and just apply a texture in SketchUp really easily to a door, so you can kind of do pretty random things very quickly and easily. So if you're trying to control something that maybe is a little bit more regimented in Mozaik, you can certainly do that freehand very easily in SketchUp. Coming out of SketchUp, I'm not going to worry about saving that. I'm going to go back to Mozaik and just show you the same kind of thing as well. So if I look at the elevation view here, if you want to change just one cabinet, you can certainly click into that cabinet, go to textures and change the texture assigned to the particular item that you're trying to control. So if I want to make this one red, something like that, I can go through and do that. And then that one's going to appear in Mozaik as that red color. So you can certainly do that for individual products, but you can also do that for multiple items. And this is probably a key thing that a lot of people don't know. Let's go ahead and just auto fill in some cabinets here just so we can get a quick knock up of a design. That'll probably be okay. I might just expand this one out. I'll just leave it at that for now. But what I wanted to show you is that I can highlight multiple cabinets. So say I want to change both the materials and the texture of those top cabinets. I'm going to right click on those. So just drag a window over them, right click, and I'm going to go override material templates because perhaps I want to manufacture them out of a different material. So I could then drop this down and say, okay, let's make that color 118 mil, for example. And then what I'm going to do there is right click and go override textures. And then I can go ahead and pick a particular texture. So I can see the next question that Jess has asked there is, can you change like to a specific color, like a Polytech color? So yeah, it certainly can. In the option here, we're going to go to the wall door texture. You can drop the menu down, and we've got a big long list here of all common suppliers, Lemonex, Formica, Polytech. There's quite a big long list in there, Prime Panels. But anyway, you can either look for it in the list or you can click the button there, and that's going to open up this option here. And from there, you can go through and you can either search. So if you know you had a particular color from Polytech, you could search for the word Polytech and it's going to show you all the Polytech options, or you could search for the particular color if you have that particular color in mind. But I'm just going to scroll down here and pick a particular color from Polytech just to show you that example. So let's just go ahead and set the top doors to Polytech Cinder and hit OK. You'll see that door texture change. If you've got other panels and under panels and things, you probably want to change the exterior texture as well. That way you're capturing everything in the one hit. And depending on what you've got selected there, that will be the appearance of those options. So, and then you can go ahead and do the same kind of thing where you can go and play with your lighting and shadows and all those kind of things too. So yeah, that's how you can go through and change those items. So if I go back to 3D and show you that, we'll be back in that same kind of view. So it's all editable and customizable from that particular perspective. I was in hidden mode there, so if I go to field, then you'll see all those lighting and shadows and options come back. Having a look through the questions, let's see. Tim is asking, I want solid 3/4 backs on my upper cabinets, but I only want 1/4 inch back with nailers on my lower cabinets. Can that be done in the job parameters, or do I need to make new libraries? Yeah, you can certainly. There's two things. The way cabinets are built are parameters, but the materials you're using are separate to that, right? So what you're sort of asking there is for backs, can you separate that out from what you want to assign to your upper cabinets compared to what material you want to assign for your lower cabinets? Allow me to explain that. So let's look at the example on screen here. And again, I'll just, due to the autofill there, I might just clear out a couple of things. I'll get rid of this one. All right, so let's have a look at the overhead cabinets. I mean, at the moment, I've just got 16 millimeter melamine selected everywhere. But if we go into libraries and material templates, and then under cabinet parts, if we have a look down under wall cabinet, so basically you can have different material template setup is what I'm trying to get to. So for example, if I have a material template, and I might just go ahead and create a new one here, and I don't have any imperial sort of materials in the library, but I'll just give you an example here. So let's just say this is going to be my uh, base cabinets. So on the base cabinets, you're asking that you want 1/4 inch backs, right? So what I can do here is set that to a similar metric material. So we're going to come down to the back material, and we're going to change the unfinished back from white 16 millimeters to a 1/4 inch, or in this case, I'm just going to pick, let's say white. I'm just going to pick, say, white 6 millimeters, which is around a 1/4 inch, right? And then, you might have a nailer that's a different thickness, whatever that is, you can assign to your nailer there as well. So in this case, I might say, look, I want to make my nailers out of whiteboard, or whatever material I want to assign to those. Again, go through and choose the appropriate one, but just to sort of demonstrate this, you can go through and choose the material that you want for the nailer as well. And then I'm going to create another material cabinet template, and I'm going to call this my upper or wall cabinets. I'm just going to use wall cabinets as the term. And in this particular one, you would change the back thickness to be your 3/4 inch. In this case, I'm going to go with 16 millimeters, but that could be the 3/4 inch material that you're referring to. And so what you would do here in your job is simply highlight all the bottom cabinets there and go override material templates. And then for your cabinet settings here, drop this down and you would choose that base cabinets option. And on the overhead ones, you would do that for your overhead cabinets, right? Coming down then, if we look at any one of these products, so let's just jump into one of them, what you're going to see straight away then is that I've got a 1/4 inch back material set there. Now, a couple of things I would need to do. I would need to change my parameters to turn on nailers because I don't have that by default, but I could easily go into my job parameters and go to nailers, and I could put in a nailer width. So let's say 100 millimeters, around about 4 inches. And you can again go through and add sizes for each of these. You've probably already got them turned on in your library. And then whether you want a bottom nailer, I'm going to say, yep, I want them on all cabinets. Whether you want fixed shelf nailers, a bottom nailer below the bottom. So you've got a few different choices there. But if I open that cabinet back up now, what you're going to see is we've got those nailers turned on. So again, you can have options to control positioning of those and where they go and whether that back will be external, because I'm going to guess, if you're doing it that way, you've probably got your back set to not be plant on. So it would probably go over the end. So rather than case depth, it would be plant on. So you'd probably be going ahead and changing that to plant on to get your nailer going, or your back going straight over that nailer, if that makes sense. So, yeah, certainly achievable and something you can do. Yeah, that's how I would go about it. I'll just set up 2 different material templates and assign them for whichever cabinets you want. All right, it looks like we've gone through and covered all the questions. Thanks for the feedback there that the streaming's been helpful. Appreciate that. Hopefully, if anyone you have any questions, feel free to ask, and I'll certainly do my best to answer them. Tim said, "Yep, that's great. Thanks. Appreciate that." I've got a couple more minutes, so if anyone has any questions, I'll see if I can answer them before we wrap it up for today. All right. Yeah, we do have another question come through. So I built a custom shaving cabinet, save it to my library. But when I use the cabinet in different measurements, like different height, width, and depth, the cabinet shelves, door, middle panel do not match. Any solution for that? It sounds like you might have made some changes that have overridden your parts. So, like if I was to show you this, if you've built a custom vanity, And it depends on how you've gone about building it too. Like if I just drag out a base cabinet here and, maybe I'll just drop this in the middle of the wall and I'll change the size. I might just make this 750 high or something like that, 450 deep. You could go through and, you probably customize things like the toe height and all that sort of stuff, so you can click on toe and override the height because you might want to have that like wall hanging and sitting higher. So there's a lot of things you can do, obviously, but you've probably gone in and made some changes to this internally as well. So if I was to go in and show you that, like let's go through to the face and clear this out. So, starting from here, I could go and split that. I might want to have at the top just a panel for plumbing to sit behind, and I can control the size of that panel. And then below that, I could start building this out to how I want. So, depending on the width of this, like, most vanities are probably going to be around 1200 wide as a sort of common size. Then we could maybe split that into sections. So I might say, look, I need 3 vertical sections there, and I could just leave them as openings at the moment. And then on each of those, you could do certain things. Like I could split that and go, look, that needs to be 3 drawers or 2 drawers, whatever it is. I could split that there and make that the same. Maybe set a set of 3 drawers on this side. And maybe in the middle, it's a door or an open shelf or something. Again, you've got options that you can control what you want to happen there. And then you can control hinge direction and all that sort of stuff. And then when we go to the interior, then we can build this out to how we want the interior to look. So again, if I make this a bit wider, it might be a bit clearer. From here, then I might go ahead and add like you might want a rail running right across the top there for this to all kind of run off. Like it might be it depends on what's happening with the plumbing, of course. There's so many different ways to build this. This might just be a stretcher and you might have it like flush to the bottom or centered on that rail, depending on how you want to build this. And then again, I might put a vertical rail running this way because I need something for my drawers to hinge off. So I'll petition and I might center that, or I might lock it to the inside of that opening. So lots of options for how you can build this. But if you've gone about building it this way, I think this is my point, that if you've gone about building it this way, and I'm just going to throw an adjustable shelf in there, it'll all be parametric. Like nothing I've done there is breaking the parametrics of that. So, I can certainly go through now and just change the size of this, and everything's going to stretch, everything's going to shrink, everything's going to get rebuilt based around that. So there's nothing that I've done in that situation that's broken that. If you've manually added parts to that, like for example, if I just go to parts and I click add a part, and I'm going to add a brand new part, and I'm just going to call this example. And if I've made it, I don't know, 100 mil wide and 2 meters long, and I've picked a top material, for example, then what I've done there, I went to pay 2 meters long. I've got a part sitting down here out there that's not going to change. It's just that size because that's what I've typed. So if I've added a manual part, as I shrink my cabinet, you can see that my manual parts remaining the same. So if you're talking about adding manual parts, how to get them to be parametric, I guess that's another topic altogether. But you could certainly, it's reasonably easy. Like you could click the calculator button there, and then click the question mark, and it's going to open a nice PDF that's going to run you through some example formulas of how you can sort of learn that side of it. But very simply, if I want to make that rail the same width as my cabinet, it's as easy as typing W and pressing test, and that's now parametrically the same width as my cabinet. So now as I change my cabinet, that rail gets smaller. As I make my cabinet bigger, that rail gets bigger. So very high level kind of basic description. But I guess what I'm trying to say there is if you've added manual parts, or you've customized parts, or you change the shape of parts, and you want to control their parametrics, it's probably learning that side of the program would be the key. All right, and then Jess is saying, what is the best subscription of SketchUp? It depends. If you want the V-Ray included, the SketchUp Studio option's great. I think it's about $1,000 US per year. Otherwise, just the standard SketchUp Pro would be the way to go if you're looking at other 3D rendering options, because there's plenty out there. So definitely do some homework and research there. But certainly, yeah, probably just the SketchUp Pro would be the way I'd go. All right, cool. Appreciate that. You've got your answer. Let's see. How would you go about suggesting to have a tall cabinet door running over 2 cabinets? We've noticed splitting the back and ends leaves you manually changing the fixed shelves. Is there a better solution? Awesome question. Yeah, definitely. So let me show you how you can use a stretcher to achieve that. So if you've got two cabinets, this is how I'd build it, right? I'd just go a standard two-door cabinet. I'm just going to drop that in the middle of the screen. So if you're going to split the cabinet into two, you're picking a point within that cabinet where you're going to split it, right? You don't even need a fixed shelf to split it. It's something that a lot of people don't know is that you can just click split and then pick a separator, right? So now I've got a separator at a certain point. I mean, personally, the way I'd probably do this, I'd clear everything out just to show you this. I'd probably clear it out, put a separator in there, and then I would split the ends and the back on the separator, right? So now all I've done, I haven't even got a shelf yet. I've got a point where I can control where this splits from. So this is really cool. Like I can take that separator and move that to wherever I want, and my cabinets are split in based on the position of that separator. It can be a little hard to grab and drag, but you get the idea. So then I can control where I want it to be. Like if I'm trying to get a section at the top that's like, 500 high, that's where I'm going to have my split. Or if I want, a section at the bottom that's a certain height, again, that's where I can have my split. From there, now you can start to build out the cabinet. Cool. So what I would do is I would go split that, put a fixed shelf, and then now I would go ahead and lock the opening height of 0 to that shelf. So opening in there, split again, go ahead and make that another fixed shelf, click above, opening height 0. Now I've got both shelves locked around that split position. So basically what you've achieved, you've automatically then got the drill in for both shelves. Both shelves are spaced around the separator. So it's going to all be lined up automatically for you. And now I can just build out the rest of my cabinet. So now I can just go look in here. I want to split that and drop in, maybe a few adjustable shelves or inner drawers or whatever I want. Maybe I want another shelf up the top. And that's it. You've got your split cabinet with one set of doors running over both cabinets. Of course, you want to kind of consider your hinge positions. Maybe you need to adjust them, but that's easy done as well. But that's 100% how I'd go about using that. I'd use a separator. And the trick to that was just simply clicking on the separator and then clicking the split end, split back button. Awesome. So let's see. Wondering the best way to replicate the door style I added before the broadcast. I think you might have missed the start of the broadcast, so just jump back and watch the recording because I spent about 15, 20 minutes going through exactly how to do that that door style. So definitely go back over that because I think that'll really help answer the question. So I won't recap that one, but that one's there ready to go. Appreciate the feedback, guys. That's probably about it. We're pretty much at time now. So look, hopefully everyone got a lot out of that today. Again, we'll do the same thing next week. So I think these sessions work a little bit better with the interaction, with some people asking questions and just me being able to answer these. So, you can think about this as kind of like an opportunity to get free training, so a lot of valuable time that can be spent here. So just, more people that turn up and go through, again, the better. But, I understand everyone can't make a certain time and time zones everywhere in the world is going to be different. But, the recordings are there to rewatch anyway. So hopefully everyone's enjoyed that and have a great weekend. Speak to you next week.